The Great Initiates by Edouard Schure. Chapter 1. Rama, the Human Races and the Origins of Religion. Heaven is my father. He it was who sired me. My lineage comprises this entire celestial assembly. The immense earth is my mother. The paramount elevation of her surface constitutes her womb. There, the Father impregnates her who functions simultaneously as his bride and his daughter. Thus chanted the Vedic poet, some 4 to 5 millennia past, before an earthen altar upon which consumed a fire of desiccated herbs. These singular utterances exude a spirit of profound divination and a lofty consciousness. They encompass the secret regarding the dual genesis of mankind. Anterior to and superior to the earth exists the divine archetype of man. Celestial is the provenance of his soul. His corporeal form, conversely, is the product of terrestrial elements, fertilized by a cosmic essence. The embraces of Aurenas and the potent mother, in the phraseology of the mysteries, denote the effusions of souls or spiritual monads that impregnate the terrestrial germs, those organizing principles absent which matter would remain merely an inert, dispersed aggregation. The highest part of the earth's surface, which the Vedic poet designates as her womb, symbolizes the continents and mountains, the very cradles of the human races. Heaven Varuna, the Aurenas of the Greeks, represents the invisible, hyperphysical order, eternal and intellectual. It encompasses the entire infinitude of time and space. In the present chapter, we shall contemplate solely the terrestrial origins of mankind, in accordance with esoteric tradition, as corroborated by contemporary anthropological and ethnological science. The 4 races that populate the globe at the present juncture are the progeny of distinct earths and zones. As successive creations and slow elaborations of the earth in travail, the continents emerged from the seas at substantial temporal intervals, which the ancient priests of India termed interdiluvian cycles. Spanning thousands of years, each continent engendered its unique flora and fauna, ultimately crowned by a human race of distinct coloration. The southern continent, engulfed by the final Great Deluge, served as the cradle of the primitive red race, of whom the American Indians constitute merely the remnant, the descendants of troglodytes who ascended to the mountain summits when their continent disintegrated. Africa is the progenitor of the black race, whom the Greeks designated Ethiopian. Asia produced the yellow race, represented by the Chinese. The most recent arrival, the white race, emerged from the forests of Europe, positioned between the tempests of the Atlantic and the smiling tranquility of the Mediterranean. All human varieties ensue from the amalgamation, combination, degeneracy, or selection of these 4 primary races. In preceding cycles, the red and black races reigned successively within potent civilizations that have deposited traces both in cyclopean constructions and in the architecture of Mexico. The temples of India and Egypt harbored abridged traditions regarding these vanished civilizations. In the current cycle, the white is the predominating race. Should the probable antiquity of Egypt and India be calculated, its preponderating influence shall be ascertained to date back 7 or 8,000 years. According to Brahmanic traditions, civilization upon our earth commenced 50,000 years ago with the red race upon the southern continent, at a time when the entirety of Europe and a portion of Asia remained beneath the ocean waves. These mythologies also alluded to a precedent race of giants. In certain caverns of Thibet, gigantic human bones have been discovered, the structure of which resembles that of the ape rather than that of man. These remains indicate a primitive, intermediate human race, one still bordering upon an animal condition, which possessed neither articulate language, social organization, nor religion. For these three entities always manifest simultaneously, such is the significance of the remarkable bardic triad which declares, "Three things come into being together: God, light, and freedom." With the initial feeble stammerings of speech, society and the nebulous notion of divine order emerge. This constitutes the breath of Jehovah in the mouth of Adam, the word of Hermes, the law of the first Manu, and the fire of Prometheus. A divine tremor traverses the human fauna. The red race, as we have stated, occupied the southern continent, now submerged beneath the waves, designated Atlantis by Plato, in accordance with Egyptian traditions. A colossal cataclysm destroyed a portion thereof and dispersed the remnants. Several Polynesian races, as well as the North American Indians and the Aztecs whom Francisco Pizarro encountered in Mexico, represent survivors of the ancient red race, the civilization of which, now lost forever, was one of material splendor and glory. The souls of these unfortunate laggards are burdened with the incurable melancholy of a dying race devoid of all hope. Following the red, the black race held dominion over the globe. The superior phenotype must not be sought within the degenerate Negro, but rather within the Nubian and the Abyssinian, in whom is preserved the mold of the race upon attaining its zenith in civilization. In prehistoric eras, the blacks invaded the south of Europe. They were repulsed by the whites, and the memory of them has been completely obliterated from our popular traditions. Nevertheless, they have left therein two indelible traces: a horror of the dragon, the emblem of their kings, and the notion that the devil is black. The blacks reciprocated the affront by rendering their devil white. During their sovereignty, the blacks maintained religious centers in Upper Egypt and in India. Their cyclopean towns ascended tier upon the mountains of Africa, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. Their social organization consisted of an absolute theocracy. Above stood the priests, dreaded as though they were gods. Below lay crawling tribes without any recognized family, whilst the women remained slaves. These priests possessed a repository of profound knowledge. They were acquainted with the principle of the divine unity of the universe and the cult of the stars, which, under the appellation of Sabianism, gradually disseminated amongst the white peoples. Yet, between the science of the black priests and the rude fetishism of the masses, there existed no intermediary, no idealistic art, nor suggestive mythology. Industry, however, had already attained an advanced stage, particularly the art of manipulating huge masses of stone by means of the ballista, and that of casting metal in immense furnaces, a task at which prisoners of war were compelled to labor. Consequently, for this race, so physically potent, possessed of passionate energy and a robust capacity for application, religion was indeed the reign of might through terror. Nature and God scarcely appeared to the consciousness of these nascent races in any form other than that of the dragon, that terrible antediluvian beast which the kings caused to be depicted upon their banners and the priests carved upon the portals of the temples. If the African sun engendered the black race, the ice of the Arctic pole may be said to have witnessed the nativity of the white race. These were the Hyperboreans alluded to in Greek mythology. Tawny-haired, blue-eyed men emerged from the north, traversing forests illumined by the lights of the aurora borealis, and accompanied by dogs and reindeer. They were commanded by bold chieftains and urged forward by female seers. Golden locks and azure eyes, Such were the predestined colors. This race is destined to invent the worship of the sun and of sacred fire, and to introduce into the world a yearning for the celestial life. At times it shall revolt against heaven and desire to scale its heights. Then again, it shall bow down before its glory in utter adoration. Like the others, the white race was compelled to liberate itself from its savage condition before attaining self-consciousness. Its distinctive attributes include a fondness for individual liberty, that reflective sensitiveness which creates the capacity for sympathy, and the predominance of the intellect, imparting an idealistic and symbolical inclination to the imagination. Instinctive sensibility engendered attachment, specifically the preference of a single man for a single woman, and subsequently the propensity of this race toward monogamy, the conjugal principle, and domestic existence. The yearning for liberty, conjoined with the impulse for sociability, gave rise to the clan, distinguished by its elective principle. The imagination of the ideal inaugurated the worship of ancestors, constituting the root and center of religion across all white nations. The social and political principle manifests when a contingent of men, still in a semi-barbaric state and beleaguered by a hostile tribe, instinctively assemble to select the strongest and most intelligent among them for defense and governance. Upon this occurrence, society emerges into existence. The chieftain stands as a nascent king, his companions the future nobility of his court, while the elders, thoughtful and contemplative, though incapable of martial advancement, constitute a senate or assembly of ancients. Yet, how is religion conceived? It is frequently posited that it originated in the dread primitive man felt before the forces of nature. Fear, however, shares no affinity with respect and love. It fails to bridge the fact with the idea, the visible with the invisible, or man with God. So long as man merely trembled before nature, he had not yet truly attained the status of man. He achieved this state when he grasped the bond uniting him to the past and the future, to something superior and beneficent, and when he offered worship to that mysterious, unknown entity. Yet, how was worship first enacted? Fabre d'Olivet provides an inspired and suggestive hypothesis regarding the manner in which ancestral worship must have been established within the white race. Two rival warriors of a bellicose clan are engaged in dispute. In a frenzy of madness, they assail one another. At that critical juncture, a woman, sister to one and wife to the other, rushes forward with disheveled tresses and separates them. With flashing eyes and imperious tones, she exclaims, in breathless utterance, that she has beheld the ancestor of the race, that conquering warrior of bygone days, appear to her within the forest. He forbids that two warrior brothers should engage in combat, decreeing rather that they must unite against the common foe. It was the spirit of the great ancestor who spoke to me, exclaims the inspired woman. I saw him. What she articulates, she believes. Being convinced herself, she persuades others. In utter astonishment, and as though overwhelmed by some invincible force, the two opponents are reconciled and regard the woman as a species of divinity. Such inspirations, followed by sudden reversals of sentiment, must have occurred frequently and in diverse forms during the prehistoric existence of the white race. In barbarian races, it is the woman who, by virtue of her nervous sensibility, is the first to harbor a presentiment of the occult and to attest to the invisible. Let us now consider, for a moment, the unexpected and prodigious consequences of an event such as the one aforementioned. Within the clan and throughout the tribe, all speak of these miraculous occurrences. The oak beneath which the inspired woman beheld the apparition becomes a sacred tree. She is returned to it, and there, beneath the magnetic influence of the moon, which plunges her into a visionary state, she continues to prophesy in the name of the great ancestor. Ere long, this woman and her counterparts, standing upon the rocks within the glades, beneath the murmur of the breeze and the distant ocean, will evoke the phantom souls of the ancestors to appear before the people, who tremble with emotion. And the latter will perceive, or believe that they perceive, these spirits, attracted by magic incantations within the floating haze and its lunar transparencies. The last of the great Celts, Ossian, evokes Fingal and his companions in the gathering clouds. Thus, at the very inception of social life, ancestral worship is established within the white race. The great ancestor becomes the god of the tribe. This constitutes the genesis of religion. Yet this is not the entirety. Surrounding the prophetess, groups of elders assemble. They keep watch over her during her lucid slumber and prophetic ecstasy. They scrutinize her varied mental states, verify her revelations, and interpret her oracles. They observe that when she prophesies in a visionary state, her countenance becomes transfigured, her words assume a rhythmic quality, and her elevated voice utters oracles as she chants a solemn melopea, replete with meaning. Hence emerged verse and strophe, poetry and music, the origins of which are regarded as divine by all nations of the Aryan race. The concept of revelation could only be derived from phenomena of this nature. We witness the simultaneous emergence of religion and worship, priests and poetry. In Asia, specifically within Persia and India, where populations of the white race founded the first Aryan civilizations through intermarriage with nations of a different complexion, men rapidly achieved ascendancy over women in the realm of religious inspiration. There, we no longer encounter mention of any but sages, rishis, and prophets. The woman, subjugated and relegated to the background, serves as priestess no longer, save at the domestic hearth. In Europe, however, traces of the preponderating role of woman are discerned among peoples of identical origin who have remained in a barbaric state for millennia. This influence manifests in the Pythoness of Scandinavia, in the Volva or Sibyl of the Edda, in the Celtic Druidesses, in the female soothsayers who accompanied the Germanic armies and determined the day on which battle was to be waged, and even in the Thracian Bacchantes. The prehistoric seeress reappears in the Pythoness of Delphi. The primitive prophetesses of the white race were organized into colleges of druidesses, under the supervision of erudite elders, or druids, the men of the oak. Initially, they were of profound service and utility. By means of their intuition, their enthusiasm, and their power of divination, they provided a mighty impetus to the race, which had but commenced its struggle with the blacks, a conflict destined to endure for several centuries. The rapid corruption of this institution, however, and the terrible abuses emanating from it, were inevitable. Perceiving themselves as arbiters of the destinies of nations, the druidesses were resolved, at any cost, to dominate them. As true inspiration waned, they sought to rule by terror, exacting human sacrifices, which they established as the essential element of their cult. In this, they were favored by the heroic instincts of the race. The whites were not lacking in courage. Their warriors despised death, and at the very first appeal, They stepped forward voluntarily and in a spirit of bravado to prostrate themselves beneath the knife of the bloodthirsty priestesses. In human hecatombs, the living were dispatched as messengers to the dead. In this manner, it was believed, the favor of the ancestors would be secured. This perpetual menace looming over the heads of the chiefs, articulated through the utterances of the prophetesses and druids, became a formidable instrument of domination in their hands. Such is the perversion to which the noblest instincts of human nature must submit, unless they are governed by a wise authority and directed toward the good by a higher consciousness. When abandoned to the hazards of ambition and personal passion, inspiration degenerates into superstition, courage into ferocity, and the sublime ideal of sacrifice into an instrument of tyranny, a treacherous, cruel exploitation. The white race, however, was merely in its infancy. Though a violent and unwise one, it had other and more sanguinary crises to endure. It was now roused by the assaults of the black race, which was beginning to invade it in the south of Europe. The struggle was unequal at the outset, for the whites, half savage and issuing from their forests and lacustrine dwellings, possessed no resources other than their spears, their bows, and their stone-pointed arrows. The blacks possessed iron weapons, brass armor, the full resources of an ingenious civilization, and their cyclopean cities. Vanquished from the very inception, the white race, transported into captivity, was initially subjugated by the blacks, who compelled them to fracture stones and transport mineral ore to their furnaces. Notwithstanding, escaped prisoners returned to their native lands bearing the customs, arts, and fragmentary science of their conquerors. They acquired two paramount disciplines from the blacks: the metallurgy of casting and sacred inscription, the art of fixing specific concepts via mysterious and hieroglyphic symbols upon animal hides, stone, or ash bark. Thus originated the runes of the Celts. Forged and molten metal constituted the instrument of warfare. Sacred writings served as the genesis of science and religious tradition. From the Pyrenees to the Caucasus, and from the Caucasus to the Himalayas, the conflict between the white and black races raged for numerous centuries. The forests constituted the salvation of the whites, for within them they could conceal themselves like feral beasts, poised to spring forth when the moment proved propitious. Century upon century, they grew more audacious and inured to combat, until ultimately they exacted their vengeance, toppled the cities of the blacks, expelled them from the European littorals, and subsequently invaded northern Africa and Central Asia, which were then inhabited by black tribes. The amalgamation of the two races was effected through two distinct methods: peaceful colonization or martial conquest. Fabre d'Olivet, that extraordinary visionary of humanity's prehistoric past, proceeds from this concept in an endeavor to elucidate the origins of the so-called Semitic and Aryan nations. Wherever white colonists submitted to black nations, accepting their dominion and receiving religious initiation from their priesthood, there, in all likelihood, emerged the Semitic nations, such as the Egyptians prior to Menes, the Arabs, Phoenicians, Chaldeans, and Jews. Conversely, the Aryan civilizations were established where the whites achieved dominion over the blacks, whether through warfare or conquest, as exemplified by the Iranians, Hindus, Greeks, and Etruscans. It must be appended that, within this classification of Aryan peoples, we also encompass all white nations that persisted in a barbaric, nomadic state during antiquity, such as the Scythians, the Geti, the Sarmati, the Celts, and, subsequently, the Germanic tribes. This would account for the fundamental diversity regarding both religion and orthography within these two great categories of nations. Among the Semites, where the intellectuality of the black race originally predominated, aside from the popular idolatry, one may observe a propensity toward monotheism, the principle of the unity of the concealed, absolute, and amorphous God having constituted one of the essential dogmas of the black priesthood and their secret initiation. Among the conquering whites, or those who retained a pure lineage, one observes, on the contrary, a tendency toward polytheism, mythology, and the personification of divinity, arising from their reverence for nature and their passionate ancestral worship. The primary distinction between the scribal methods of the Semites and those of the Aryans may be explicated in a similar fashion. Why do all Semitic nations inscribe from right to left, while all Aryan nations proceed from left to right? The rationale provided by Fabre d'Olivet is as curious as it is original. It evokes before us a veritable vision of this vanished antiquity. It is widely acknowledged that in prehistoric eras, writing was unknown to the populace. This knowledge was disseminated among them solely through phonetic writing, or the art of shaping the precise sounds of words by means of letters. Hieroglyphic writing, however, the art of representing objects by arbitrary signs, is as ancient as human civilization itself. In these primordial times, it remained the exclusive privilege of the priesthood, for it was deemed a sacred entity, a religious function, and originally a divine inspiration. When, in the southern hemisphere, the priests of the black or southern race inscribed their mysterious symbols upon animal hides or stone tablets, they were accustomed to facing the South Pole. Thus, the hand moved in the direction of the east, the source of illumination. Accordingly, they wrote from right to left. The priests of the white or northern race acquired the art of writing from the black priests and initially commenced by imitating their method. Yet, when the sentiment of their origin had developed within them, alongside national consciousness and racial pride, they devised their own symbols, and, rather than turning toward the south, the domain of the blacks, they faced the north, the land of their ancestors, while continuing to write in the direction of the east. Consequently, their characters proceeded from left to right. Hence the direction of the Celtic runes of Zend, Sanskrit, Greek, Latin, and all the scripts of the Aryan races. They proceed in the direction of the sun, the source of all terrestrial life, yet they look toward the north, the land of their ancestors, the mysterious wellspring of celestial dawns. The Semitic and Aryan currents constitute the two streams along which all our ideas, mythologies, and religions, as well as our arts, sciences, and philosophies, have reached us. Each of these currents carries within it a diametrically opposed conception of life, the reconciliation and equilibrium of which would constitute truth itself. The Semitic current encompasses absolute and superior principles, the concept of unity and universality in the name of one supreme tenet, which, in its application, leads to the unification of the human family. The Aryan current contains the concept of ascending evolution across all terrestrial and superterrestrial kingdoms, and in its application leads to an infinite diversity of development in the name of nature's abundance and the manifold aspirations of the soul. The Semitic genius descends from God to man. The Aryan reascends from man to God. The former is figured as the justice-loving archangel descending to earth, armed with sword and lightning bolt, the latter as Prometheus, clutching the fire he has purloined from the heavens, and encompassing Olympus with his far-reaching gaze. We bear within ourselves both the Semitic and the Aryan genius. Alternately, we think and act under the influence of the one or the other. In our intellectual existence, however, they have become entangled rather than fused into a unity. They contradict and combat one another in our innermost sentiments and subtlest thoughts, as well as within our social existence and institutions. Concealed beneath multiple forms. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.